Imagine being told your entire life's work, the farm your family has tended for generations, the land that's been in your bloodline for a century or more, is about to be hit with a tax bill so massive that your children might have to sell it just to pay the government. Now imagine you've just been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and you're sitting there doing maths in your head, wondering if you should quite literally die before April to save your family from financial ruin. That's not a dystopian novel. That's not some grim hypothetical. That's the reality facing British farmers right now because of Labour's inheritance tax raid. And when Keir Starmer was confronted about it directly, asked point blank if he's aware that terminally ill farmers are planning to expedite their own deaths, she's talking about suicide. She's talking about people who are terminally ill looking at the calendar and thinking, if I die before April when this policy kicks in, my family inherits the farm tax-free. If I die after April, they get hit with a bill that could destroy everything. So these people are contemplating ending their lives early to save their families. That's where we are. That's the human cost of this policy. And Starmer's response? He said he's had discussions with individuals who've drawn all manner of things to his attention, and then he pivoted straight back to defending the policy as sensible reform. No acknowledgement of the horror of what he's just been told. No expression of concern or empathy. No indication that maybe, just maybe, if your policy is driving terminally ill people to consider suicide, you should rethink it. Just a flat defense of the policy and a vague assurance that he's listening. It was one of the most tin-eared, emotionally void responses I've seen from a prime minister in years, and the backlash has been absolutely ferocious. Cat Smith, the Labour MP asking the question, went on to say that farmers who backed Labour at the last election feel misled, that this policy will pull the rug from underneath farming communities and obliterate the family farm for many. She described a situation where elderly farmers, or those with terminal diagnoses, are now in a position where if they die before April, their farm passes to the next generation tax-free. But if they die after, their family farm could become completely unviable. She's basically pleading with Starmer to see the human dimension here, to understand that this isn't just about tax revenue or policy wonkery. It's about people's lives, their livelihoods, their legacies, their mental health. Starmer doubled down. He said he understands the concern, he's met with the president of the National Farmers Union, and he thinks this is sensible reform. Sensible reform. There's that phrase again. He used it multiple times. It's classic political defensive language. Frame your controversial policy as reasonable, balanced, necessary, and hope that repetition makes it true. But when you're talking about a policy that's literally driving people to consider suicide, sensible reform sounds obscene. It sounds like you're either completely disconnected from the reality on the ground, or you just don't care. Lib Dem MP Alistair Caramel, who chairs the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, jumped in and said nobody should be left feeling like they'd be better off dying between now and next April. Starmer's response? No, of course, but governments have to bring about sensible reform. It's the political equivalent of saying, yeah, that's tragic and all, but we've got a job to do. The lack of empathy is staggering. The inability to read the room is staggering. This is a prime minister who's so committed to defending a policy that he can't even acknowledge the human suffering it's causing without immediately pivoting back to his talking points. Caramel then made a really powerful point. He said Starmer doesn't have to listen to him, doesn't have to listen to the farmers, doesn't even have to listen to the NFU president. But why isn't he listening to his own party colleagues? Because it's not just opposition MPs criticizing this policy. Labour MPs from rural constituencies are openly questioning it. Cat Smith, who asked the original question, represents Lancaster and Wyre. She's not some Tory trying to score points. She's one of Starmer's own MPs telling him this policy is cruel and farmers feel betrayed. And Starmer's response to Caramel? I do listen to party colleagues all the time, which is politicians speak for, I've heard you, I've noted your concerns, and I'm ignoring them. Let's talk about the politics of this, because it's genuinely baffling. Why is Starmer willing to die on this hill? Why is he so committed to defending a policy that's alienating rural voters, his own MPs, and creating the worst possible headlines about terminally ill farmers contemplating suicide? The revenue it brings in, $500 million a year, is a rounding error in the context of the national budget. It's not a major revenue raiser. It's not essential to the budget. It's an ideological choice dressed up as sensible reform, and the human cost is catastrophic. Starmer had multiple opportunities in that committee session to show some humanity, to acknowledge the pain, to signal that maybe the policy needs another look. But instead, he gave robotic, defensive answers that made him look callous. The Daily Express has been running a campaign called Save Britain's Family Farms, calling for a U-turn. Other media outlets have picked up the story. The pressure is building, but Starmer is showing no signs of backing down. He's gambling that this will blow over, that farmers will eventually accept the policy, that the public will move on to other issues. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. This isn't an abstract policy debate. This is about suicide. This is about the end of family farms. This is visceral, emotional, and it's not going away. Rural constituencies are already turning against Labour. The 5 councillor defections to the Greens we talked about earlier are part of a broader pattern. Labour is losing support in rural areas and small towns. This inheritance tax policy is pouring petrol on that fire. And rural seats are marginal. Labour loses some of them and Starmer's majority shrinks, and his political position becomes even more precarious. He's playing with fire and he doesn't seem to realize it. The most damning moment in that committee session was when Caramel pointed out that Starmer doesn't even have to listen to the opposition or to farmers. He should listen to his own MPs. And Starmer just brushed it off. That tells you everything you need to know about his leadership style. He's not building consensus. He's not listening to concerns. He's imposing policy from the top and expecting everyone to fall in line. That works when you're popular and things are going well. When your polling is in the toilet and you're facing crises on multiple fronts, it's a recipe for disaster. So here's where we are. Keir Starmer is refusing to U-turn on a farm inheritance tax that is literally driving terminally ill farmers to consider suicide to save their families. He's been told this directly in a parliamentary committee by one of his own MPs, and his response is to call it sensible reform and move on. The Countryside Alliance calls him heartless, the opposition calls him cruel and vindictive, his own MPs are questioning the policy. One has already been stripped of the whip for voting against it. And through all of this, Starmer just keeps digging, apparently convinced that projecting strength is more important than showing humanity. It's one of the most politically and morally indefensible positions I've seen a prime minister take, and the damage, both to farming communities and to Labour's reputation, is only going to get worse. If you want to stay on top of every development, every U-turn or refusal to U-turn, every moment of political chaos, make sure you're subscribed to UK Political Insight, because we're covering it all, every single day. Smash that like button if this story made you angry, drop a comment with your thoughts on whether Starmer will eventually back down or whether he's prepared to let family farms die on this hill, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.